Hey, what is up, guys? Grab yourself a cup of coffee, a cup of tea, whatever you want to grab. This should be the third episode in this video, and I did some moving around stuff so this wall is not so barren. If you watched some of my older episodes or older videos where I did actually do a podcast style conversation with people, it was so much more barren. These walls had nothing on them. I have posters, I have masks on this wall. I moved some of the ones that there was one sitting right above my screen mask, so I moved it down here, and then I moved this poster, not poster, but this right here, this painting. I put it right there. I plan to slowly fill up this portion where there's nothing. Maybe, I don't know yet, but anyway, as always, thank you for showing up. Thank you for being here. This is my side channel. I'm not going to promote my other channel because I want you guys to, just pick one and go with it. Pick one and go with it, whether you like podcasts, or whether you like watching me or just listening to me talk. But this is the next video in the podcast series. This one is not going to be on DVD because the last one was on DVD. This one is more about my middle school experiences, and I'll probably have some gameplay in the background. I don't know what I'm going to go with yet, but I will have something rolling in the background. But I don't know how to animate, and I don't know how to make a good video that would be able to portray what all happened. But so in middle school, when I got into middle school, I was already a little bit behind mentally. So when I was in kindergarten, I was mentally behind. I had lived with my mother, and it was just not a good time for me, and I was behind. So a lot of things people were working on, a lot of things that people were smart at, writing their own name. When I wrote, I it was so bad. You couldn't understand what I was writing. Never. Even if you tried the hardest, you could. I didn't know what letters were, and it was just rough. And then as I was growing up, I became very rebellious. I was a very rebellious child. I would fight. I'd get in trouble. I would constantly threaten people, and I would get bad grades. I sucked as a little kid. I was a little ankle biter, and I think it was partially because my home life. That was before I got adopted by my grandmother. I will probably talk about this better in a different podcast, talking about that, but I would like to push that off to the wayside for a little bit. But I was a really rebellious child. I was really angsty, even though that I was even though that nowadays I'm very soft-hearted, I'm very nice, and only with my close buddies do I actually threaten things, and most of the time I'm normally joking. But I did make a few friends with kids that were also rebellious and mean, and I got made fun of a lot. Not only because of... So, I went through a transition. I was really skinny when I lived with my mother, and then when I lived with my grandma, I packed on weight, a lot of weight, really fast. And I didn't like running, I didn't like exercising, I didn't like doing extra stuff. I hated it. When I was skinny, I got made fun of for my shoes, how I smelled like cigarettes, how I smelled like this and that, and people made fun of me for it all the time. And even as I've become an adult, I hate the smell of menthol or cigarettes. My mother and father used to smoke all the time, and it would cling to my clothes like no tomorrow. So a lot of people thought I was smoking and doing stuff like that, and I'm like, dude, we're in the first grade, we're learning stuff. We're literally learning multiplication that I didn't even know what cigarettes were at the time. But besides hating the smell of cigarettes, I also hated the smell of incense, because my father used to use incense to hide smells and certain things. And so I was almost like an outcast because I did not fit in. A lot of the kids, so I went to school at a pretty wealthy area, where kids were either in high tier wealth or rich. So I got made fun of for having holes in my shirt and holes in my jeans, pants. I had too small of shoes. I constantly have a problem of like my sole would rip from my shoe, so like I'd be walking around with like my sole going this way while my shoe is going this way. And dude, people used to laugh at me all the time. They tell me, go buy new shoes, and I'm like, I don't have money for shoes, so shut up and leave me alone. And that led to a lot of arguments, and teachers didn't help either. I think there was only another thing too was I got a bunch of hand-me-down stuff. That was also another problem, was like coats and hoodies. Like, teachers would wonder why I wouldn't come in with a coat on during like winter time, and I'd be wearing like 3 different hoodies. And then around the time I got adopted by my grandmother, well, it was more like my mother left me with my grandmother, and I was starting to pack on weight. I was starting to get heavier, and I remember I went through a wicked growth spurt, and my feet grew. And I remember it was like my 4th grade teacher, 3rd or 4th grade teacher. I remember being after school, having to wait on my grandmother to come pick me up from school, because I didn't want to go home on the buses, because my cousins were on the buses, and they didn't want me to sit with them. And whenever I tried to sit with people my own age, they would normally push me away, or there wasn't seats open, or I'd normally end up sitting alone by myself, and I hated it. I hated sitting by myself because I didn't have anything to preoccupy myself, and I normally just would stare out the window and either doze off, or I'd just like sit there like staring out the window at people. And so I remember while I was waiting on my grandmother to pick me up from school, I was talking to the, like I said, it was like 3rd or 4th grade teacher, and she asked me about my shoes, and I'm like, what about my shoes? She's like, aren't those really tight? Those look really tight on your feet. And I'm like, yeah, because at the time, like, my shoes were like so tight that like my feet are purple. And, like, mine looked like all bulged out. It was like my feet were accustomed to being squeezed. Like, the shoes were just not. I should have got shoes a long time ago, but we didn't have money for it. And I remember she gave me a pair of like brand new boots like the next day while I was waiting for my grandmother. I don't know what I did or what I had to do that my grandmother came after me. I think I was getting like after school tutoring. I was like asking for more help. Ooh, we got another stink bug for the bottle. For anyone confused, I have a bottle of stink bugs. I hate stink bugs. They're disgusting. They're gross. And we've just been through stink bug season. I filled a water bottle full of them, and now I've just continuously filled it. But besides that, so she gave me. I like I said, I don't remember what happened for me to stay there. Like I said, I think it was getting after school tutoring, and I just remember she gave me these boots that were a little bit bigger than them. They still squeezed my feet, but they weren't so bad. And I remember I hadn't cried in so long. I think the last time I cried was like a few years before that. It was around the time I was like still avidly living with my mom and dad, but I had just been like deaf-toned to everything. And I remember I broke down crying. I thanked this teacher. I hugged her. I was crying, and I was like I was happy, but I was also upset because I knew my situation was bad and it sucked. I knew it was horrible, and it was horrible to go through, and I was questioning why I had to go through it, why most kids don't have to go through it. Why am I like the one person in the world that got given like the worst luck known to man? And so I'm like fighting tears, and this teacher looked so she looked so confused because she had like no idea what all had been going on. Like, she just looked at me with this sorry look. It was like sorry and confusion, and I explained in vague detail, like as vague as I could get without like telling her outright what had been happening in my life. And I remember one day she offered me to come to her house, and I remember, like, most people think, you can't go home with a teacher, that's creepy, oh my god, that's weird. But like, so in my head, I'd known this teacher, and I went home. I told my grandmother, I'm like, hey, this teacher is offering me to go to her house after school to see her, to meet her kids, to talk to them, and that, and like I was super excited. And my grandmother was weary. Explained to her, like, she bought me boots. She's a really nice teacher. I don't think she's creepy or weird. And I remember like the next day I came to her and I was like so excited. I'm like, could I go to your house? Like, and I was like so excited. And she ended up taking me home. She had a mom minivan, and she ended up taking me home. And it's not too far from where I live even now. It wasn't too far away. And I remember meeting her kids. I still interact with her, and I still interact with her kids. I still have them on Facebook, and I still have them on my phone. But she had 3 kids, 2 males, 1 female. And I remember they were like so much younger than me, and it felt weird. It really did. It felt weird being like the oldest one in the room. So I was like trying to find stuff to play, and like we were having a fun time. It was a great time. I loved playing around with them and having fun. And then after that, I moved on to the next grade, and I didn't see her as much, and we kind of talked a lot less, but I still went to her whenever I was like feeling down. And another person in my life that was very positive besides her was also a lunch lady that was really sweet. She was very nice and very kind, and I used to sit alone all the time in lunch. A lot of kids didn't want to be around me. A lot of kids didn't like the smell of menthols, and a lot of kids thought I was weird. A lot of kids didn't like how a lot of kids looked at me and was like, "You poor," and I'd just be sitting there like, okay. And this lunch lady, I remember, she was such a sweetheart, and I loved her family. She used to, like, if I had a really rough day, like where I just sat my head down, and like if I cried in that, sometimes when everyone would leave, she'd come and she'd sit beside me and talk with me. Sometimes she'd give me extra food. She was such a nice lady, and she understood my situation. I remember there was one day I was having a really rough day, and I remember I just broke down and I told her almost everything about my life. And I remember telling her to keep it a secret, because if she told other people that they may look at me weird, or the teachers would look at me funny or stuff like that. I don't remember what was going through my head that made me tell her, like, shh, don't say anything. And she made the promise she wasn't going to tell anybody. And I remember she didn't tell anybody. And then around like 5th or 6th grade, I got adopted by my grandmother. And I remember around the time of the adoption, I went through like the quote unquote emo phase, but like it was before I became a teenager. But it was more like I hit my peak depression at that point. I'd been so sad from everything that had happened. I was sad because of what was going on. I was sad at my predicament, my situation. I thought it was my fault. I thought a lot of things, and there was so much going through my head, and the isolation, not having anyone to talk to, the lack of people wanting to be in my life pushed me really far away from society, and I became very quiet. I became distant. I cried a lot. A lot of people don't know, but when I would get home from school, I would curl up in my bed in fetal position, and I would cry. And I'm okay with admitting that. I'm okay with admitting that. Like 9 out of 10 days, I would come home, I'd curl up in my bed, and I would cry. Because I would get off around like 2:30, 2:40, somewhere in there. And I wouldn't get out of bed until around like 5. I'd cry until I fall asleep, or I'd cry until about 5. And then I'd get up, I'd sit there, I'd listen to some music, I would play some video games, and I'd try and function. But I was like so deep into depression that I spent most of my time just in my room. I spent all my time pushing everyone away and being alone and being sad, and it really wore on me in so many ways. And I'm very honest about everything. I pushed myself so far that I had attempted my life, and I had promised myself I was never going to put myself in that position again. I told myself I was never going to blame myself for what my mother and father did, how bad they were. I was going to be better than them. And so from then on, I tried to push myself forward and break the depression. I tried to come out. I tried to talk to people. And I remember the next day, I was so distraught after that event that a little girl who was in my class told me to go unalive myself. And I remember I looked at her and I told her I already tried. And I remember the whole principal got involved. I remember my family got involved, and I tried to play it off the best I could. And people never really found out. My grandmother freaked out, and I was on everyone was on high alert watching me. And I hid it. I hid the depression as best I could, and also on top of that, it was also me somewhat trying to change too. Was trying to come out of my shell, talk to people more, and I was trying my heart out. I would try and talk to people all the time, and I got called annoying. I got called ugly. Who, me? I'm not ugly. I got called ugly. I got called poor. I got called a lot of names. I got completely outcasted. I tried my best to be involved with people. I tried to make close friends. I was really close with one friend that I had in middle school that I was really tight with, and he eventually made friends with some other kid and slowly preferred being friends with this other kid than me. So every time I go to talk to him, it'd be a one-sided conversation, and that one wore on me too. And that one also kind of taught me to stop having such one-sided friendships. I wish that would have taught me how to not have a one-sided relationship. But what had happened was I slowly grew. I got better. I got better at schooling. I got better at what I did. I think it was around 8th grade. I got tired of people calling me fat. I got tired of people calling me unathletic, overweight. I was a chubby kid, and I will probably put images of chubby version of me, but I was really heavy set, and I was unable to do running. I was unable to jog. I was so out of breath all the time. I could not do even running around in our school. It was just rough. It was really rough for me. And I remember it was around 8th grade. I just took all my pent-up energy, anger, and I remember I had a phone at the time. It was around the time that my grandmother actually bought me a card for my phone. So I had a phone in middle school. So 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, I had a phone, but I did not have a phone card on it. So I didn't have Wi-Fi, I didn't have connection, I didn't have any way of getting music. I had a music app on my phone where I had to plug in my earbuds, and when I did, I had to twist the top until until it would work correctly, and then I'd have to pinch the headphones back, and then I'd have to hope to get a good radio station. Like I said, I love rock, and it was so difficult to find rock because everywhere is hip hop. There was a lot of there was good songs I found and bad songs I didn't like. But around the time that I got the phone card, I started watching a lot of rock songs. That was where I got into 3 Days Grace. That was where I got into I didn't get into Slipknot until later on, but that was around the time I got into 3 Days Grace and watched other rock videos. But I started running. I started getting athletic. I started, it was just a lot of running. I ran until I puked. I ran until I collapsed onto the floor. I even had sometimes where I was literally laying on the floor, grabbing at my chest, thinking I'm having a heart attack. I would run from morning to almost mid-afternoon. I ran so much and I lost a lot of weight quickly. I was like 200 pounds almost. I was a fat kid. I was really fat. I was really heavyweight, like really bad. I was puffy and I was small. And so I started running and I ran and I cut weight. I cut back on meals. I started paying attention to what I eat because I was eating a lot of chips. I was drinking a lot of soda. I didn't care about my own hygiene. I didn't care about what I did. But this time I wanted to fix myself and I started running and I got really athletic. I got really good. And I remember going into high school, most people were astonished that I'd lost weight, that I had grown, I'd gotten bigger, I'd gotten stronger. And even though that some of the people that I still went to middle school with still bullied me, a lot of people still were okay with talking to me. Some people respected me. Some people were actually okay with talking to me. A lot of the people from my high school didn't know, or from my middle school and from my high school, didn't know what all happened. I don't normally tell people the story of my childhood. I don't normally like to talk about it because sometimes it's a little rough. It's a little rough to talk about, especially to people. It's rough for me to talk about it because sometimes it feels like I'm reliving it when I talk about it. It reminds me of everything that had happened, and it's really rough. It's really rough when you have reminders of what happened, when you want to forget about it and you can't. It's so ingrained in your brain that when you talk about it to people, when you try and conversate about it, when you try and get over it, it embeds itself deeper. It feels like it makes it worse. It makes you remember more. It makes you feel worse about it. So I didn't tell people. I rarely talked about it to people unless you got really close to me. And like I said, I had a really rough middle school. It was a lot of bad grades. It was a lot of trying to get better grades. It was teachers. The thing I hated was teachers did not like me. Teachers did not like me, except for two of them from my middle school. Most of them didn't like me. And I seen one of them a few months ago while at my local Dollar General. I remember I seen them and I said hi and they were all happy and nice to me. And it's I remember in middle school when you would pull my grades out, or when you would ask why I don't have a project, when I tried to tell you hey, I had stuff going on at home because I live on a farm. I do a lot of farming stuff, and normally when I get home I don't have much time. I'm normally doing stuff almost all day, so even making videos now as I've gotten older, where I can speed through most of the work here, I still barely have time to do stuff. And I would try and compromise with teachers. I'd try and find time with teachers. I'd ask for more time with stuff, and a lot of them would end up not giving me the time, or would almost scold me for it. And I remember there was this one English teacher. I will not say her name, but she despised me. She despised me with almost every grain in her soul. And every project, everything that we did, if I failed it or if it was late, she would call me out in front of everyone. And I remember kids would laugh at me. She would call me out and start talking about me to my face while kids would laugh. And you don't know how many times I had to hold back anger because, I was trying to be good. I was trying to not, fight teachers and fight everyone around me. And I was trying to be better. And another thing, too, is when I was upset or when I was angry and I didn't want to talk to people, she would call it out, too. Oh, he's upset. We can't do anything today because he's upset. Oh, boo hoo boo. And it's don't talk to me. Just leave me alone. That's all I want. Because I'm having a rough day. I don't want to be angry. I don't want to be upset. I don't want to come off sarcastic to you. And she just was rude to me constantly, really rude to me. And I took it. My health teacher, my history teacher was one of my favorites. I loved him. He was a really cool guy. He was a single dude. I don't know how he was single. Yeah, a lot of dad jokes, a lot of puns. The only thing that he didn't like about me was that I would fall asleep in his class. A lot of times I was tired. I've been tired. My mother was narcoleptic too, so a lot of people believe that I have narcolepsy. So sometimes, like when I'm in situations like where I was in school, I could fall asleep while reading something. I could fall asleep while sitting there. I was just constantly sleep deprived, tired, and I was always falling asleep in history class. And I remember he despised that, and I thought it was fine, because he didn't make fun of me a lot, but he woke me up in the most strange ways, like a megaphone once. He slammed a book on my desk, but we used to joke and talk, and we also, if you could get him into a story, you would most likely not have to deal with homework, because he'd get so invested in the story, and then he'd be like, I'm sorry guys, I got too invested in the story. Tonight we won't have homework, but tomorrow night we will have homework for sure. And even though that we sometimes we had to double up on homework, it still was fun to get out of work those days, because sometimes when you're having a rough day and you don't want to do homework that night, you just could get them into a story. And I was really good at getting them into stories too. That was fun. Was always ways of getting him to talk about stories and stuff. And he was a pretty cool guy. And then I had a a health teacher that she didn't despise me as bad as the English teacher, but she was still kind of rude. And I remember there was one day she upset me so bad. I think she kept calling me out for talking during a movie or something. And I remember she's diabetic. So she's like telling me to be quiet. And I remember I sat there and I'm like, if you keep calling me out in front of everyone, I'm going to take that Coca-Cola that you have in your mini fridge behind you. I'm going to take your insulin, and I'm going to hide it. I'm going to hide it, you fat. And I remember the teacher looked at me, because I thought I said it so low that she didn't hear me. And she looks at me, and I'm like... And I remember she looked upset, but I never got in trouble for that. And I remember I thought I was going to get called down to the principal's office for telling a teacher that I was going to take her insulin, because she didn't have backup insulin. She used to have a mini fridge, and she would keep I think it was a mini can of Coke, and then her insulin in there, and that was before she transitioned to the like patch ones that you can stick in your arm, which she did later transition to that one. I think it was towards my 8th grade year that she did that, but either way, I was so surprised I got away with that. But anyway, this video is dragging on. I'm almost at the 30-minute mark. I don't know if I'm going to cut anything out. There's probably going to be gameplay in the background of this. I don't know what gameplay yet. I've already talked about that. But that was middle school for me. Hopefully in the next video, I'll have something else to talk about. As always, I love you guys, and check out my other videos. Again, I'm Crunchy Almond. I just wanted to make this off to the side because I thought this would be fun. As always, subscribe, like, do whatever you like.